What's up, guys? Team Hard Life Captain Alberto Zertuche here. Alright, I'm on the road right now, going to make 3 deliveries and then going to catch a boat to go do some fishing. So today is Storytelling Thursday, and one of the things that some of our subscribers were asking about was the manta ray story. Now that's a very interesting story because that's when I truly got to learn the respect of what Avet Reels has done or can do on a monster catch. On that note, I don't remember exactly what day it was. It was a Saturday or Sunday, and it was right after I had hooked my 12'6" tiger, which actually set the land-based world record for the International Land-Based Shark Fishing Association. So guys that I was working with at Breakaway Tackle with Nick Myers told me that anytime I was getting, hooked up with a monster catch, because at that time all we had was cameras, and he was already doing YouTube, so he knew the importance of a great video and how it could help me in my business, because he has always been there from the beginning helping us out and giving us pointers on how we can make our business grow and stuff like that. So we're always indebted to him. We'll help him out anyway. Good people there. You can check him out at breakawayusa.com. And well, getting back to the story, so I'm out there on Bob Hall Pier, and I already had started experimenting with letting big Jack Crevalle go with a little bit of jewelry. And what I mean by that is my big rig shark leader that we would attach, and basically I would bring in the Jack Crevalle as quickly as possible, and then I would release it with my leader still attached with no surf weight or no balloons, no float. Just let him swim out on his own. And about 90-95% of the time, they'll swim straight out from the end of the pier. So I was like, all right, cool. I'll send one out, and then I'll send a second one after if we can catch one. Well, this one goes out and goes left. And it stayed left for a good long time. It was probably 3 to 4 hours. I left it there. And then after a while, you heard it start to click, 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 click. And the way I set the drag on these reels is just enough to slow the Jack Crevalle down, but enough to where if a shark were to hit it, it would let me know. The reason I know this is because as it's going out, he's cruising along, and then I'll just bump up the drag, one click at a time, and he will eventually slow down, and you can see him still pulling as he's tail whipping, trying to get away from you, but he stays in place. So in doing that, that's when we would mostly get our shark pickups. So the guys let me know that, hey man, your reel's making some noise over here. And I was like, all right. I get over there, and sure enough, it click, 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 it starts picking up speed. I was like, oh, all right, this is gonna be a nice one, because it was already a 40-inch Jack Crevalle, and using whole and alive. So as it's going out, I go ahead and harness up. I'm using an 80 Avet 2-speed in gold and a 555 Harrington spooled up. At that time, I was still using 100-pound Power Pro, top shot it with mono. Again, this is back when I was still using mono. The monofilament top shot was 130-pound test. The braid was 100-pound test. I had 1,500 yards of braid and 400 yards of 100-pound or 130-pound mono on top of that. So when he swam off, he was out about 1,000 yards. So he starts swimming away. He's swimming and swimming, and then he turns around and starts coming back in. And I was like, okay, he's swimming toward me before I had a chance to set the hook. So when a fish is swimming toward me, I don't set anything. I just soak up the drag, or the loose line. I start pulling all that in. Well, he's coming in. I get a good amount of line back in, and then he turns and starts to peel line off, and I'm talking at a lot faster rate. It freaking. So at that time, I take it up to strike. I reach back, pump it a few times, setting the hook, because I was using 2 16-aught J hooks in this Jack Crevalle. So I set the hook on it, and at that time it starts picking up more speed and goes even faster. mind you, the drag setting that I had originally set on this 82 speed was the same amount of drag that I've pulled in my world record Tiger in an hour and 35 minutes. So there's going to be some key things that are happening at this point with the reel and me and learning about the drag. The 12-foot Tiger was obviously the biggest Tiger that I have ever caught over 9'3", I think at the time. It was like 9 foot something. I've already caught like 20 something in the 9-foot range. So this one, the first 12-footer, was a very learning experience. Well, at that point, the first 30 minutes of him just pulling line off, and he just stopped on his own, and he comes back. I was like, oh, okay. I'm thinking I slowed him down. So I start reeling in, pulling in the slack, and I get almost all of it back. Well, he turns to burn off again. I said, oh, not this time. So what I did was I took it from strike to lock down on the 80 Avet with the original preset drag. So he peels off 1,000 yards of line in that one run without hesitation. Not one time did it slow down. No, it just was full bore 1,000 yards of line. And when you spool enough reels as I have, you can sit there, and I'll be pretty close. I mean, I'm within maybe 50 to 100 yards of that actual number, seeing the line disappear off this reel. And everybody on the pier by this time is like, holy smokes. So I drop a call to Nick Myers. I was like, hey, Bo, I said, I'm hooked up again. I need you to come out here and film this catch. He's like, I'm on my way. I'll be there in like 15, 20 minutes. Sure enough, so he gets off the phone. He takes off. And so this monster catch is taking off for a second monster run. So I'm sitting there and I'm holding on and I'm leaning back. I'm about, I'm a good lean back, probably the way I am now in the truck. And well, it stops about there, and again, it's just cruising along, and then it turns back again. So I was like, I'm going to get all my line back, but at the same time, I'm going to increase the drag, because I wanted to make sure, I'd always heard the horror stories of big hammers killing themselves on the fight, so I definitely didn't want my first monster hammer to die on me like that. So as he's swimming toward us, I was able to hold the spool, back the drag off, insert 6 more clicks on my preset, and then take it all the way back to full strike. And I was like, soaking up the drag, and I get almost a whole 1,000 yards back again. And actually, I think I got a little more back this time. Well, it turned to run again, and it pulled off every bit of line that I had just gotten from him, and a little bit of extra, all in one shot. And by this time, Nick and his crew had showed up, and I'm sitting there on the pier on the left side, just talking with the other sharkers that had been there, that all of us have nailed, 8 and 9 and 10 footers kind of deal. So there was a crew of guys that knew what they were doing. There was several of them that had actually been out there for some bigger sharks as well. So we had a collective community of sharkers, all just throwing ideas around of what it could be that has just hooked up on a free-lined live Jack Crevalle. So I'm just sitting here stoked out of my mind, and I'm getting phone calls from my son at this time. He was a lot younger, and it was my day to visit with him, and pick him up. So I tell him, I said, son, I'm hooked up on a monster fish. I said, I'll get it in real quick, and I'll see you in like 2 hours. And he's like, okay, Papa. Or, okay, Dad, I'll see you in a little bit. I was like, okay. He's like, I want pictures. I'm like, I got you. So I'm fighting this thing. It comes in, takes off for the third run now. On the third run, it's just burning. And mind you, I had already increased the drag on this, so now I'm really leaning back on this fish. This 555 is, inches above the handrail kind of deal. And I've never seen my 555 boat over in this kind of fashion. Mind you, that day it was hot, stifling hot, no wind, middle of the day. The fight started around 11 in the morning, and it's now 12 o'clock. And that morning I had put on sunscreen. Well, by that time I was sweating so much that it was caked off all over me. it was pretty gross. It was pretty gross. So I'm sitting there and I'm chugging water, and everybody's like, dude, you're not drinking beer? And I'm like, no, man. I said, I need some water. I said, this thing, it's a monster. And so that was a real surprise to them, because they've seen me land fish in a matter of minutes, in the 8-foot range, no worries. For this thing to take off on 3 monster runs after I had already increased the drag was just like, holy smokes. So the first 30 minutes was at 20 to 25 pounds of drag. The next 30 minutes was at full strike on the original setting. I haven't done the math on that yet, but I'm pretty sure I could talk to Avet Reels and figure that out, which I will get back to you on that. Now, the next one was when I added 6 clicks on the preset drag and then took it up to full strike again. Now that was some serious drag. I had never played with that amount of drag unless it was when I was breaking my surf weights loose. So it peels off 1,000 yards. And I'm like, Jesus, this thing is like, it's a monster. So sure enough, it gets out there to that same area on the spool, and it just stops and then turns back around like, nothing. I'm like, hey man, I said, I'm gonna go 6 more clicks on this thing. So I back it off again, I go 6 more clicks, and I take it up to full strike again. And mind you, I'm probably very much pushing the limits of the 100-pound braid, because I was getting into that braid very quickly once the mono was gone. So I'm sitting there, and I get all the line back and a little bit more this time. And I'm like, all right, I'm winning this fight. I think I finally got him. Well, off in the distance, we could see 2 large fins. We're talking probably 400 yards out. You can see these 2 fins up out of the water. So we start thinking monster hammer. And I hear somebody to my right saying, hey, look like you got a monster hammer on it. I look over, and it's Eric Oslin's, Oz from Down Beach. And I turned around and I was surprised, because I'd never seen him out on Bob Hall Pier. So I was like, what the hell are you doing out here? I said, you don't belong on Bob Hall Pier, joking around, because we were cool at the time. And he just looked at me. He's like, well, I heard you were hooked up. And I was like, yeah, man. He's like, you know what it is? I said, I don't know, but we can see 2 fins out there. He's like, you thinking big hammer? I said, that's the only thing it could be to pick up a Jack Crevalle of this size and everything else, So we're sitting there talking a little bit, and it starts peeling line off. Just bowed over on this 555. So I go back to fighting the fish, pounding water as much as I could, and this continued on for about the next 2 hours. Just, I'll bring it in, he'd sit there and dump the reels. Come in, dump the reel, and I was like, wow, this thing is, it's really becoming a nuisance, And I was like, man, I'm getting tired, And they're like, hey, we'll pitch in, we'll reel it in for you. I was like, no, that ain't gonna happen. I'm not giving up on my fish, So I sit there, and finally, each time that it would come in, it would come closer and closer and closer. And I'm not talking by like hundreds of yards. It would come in maybe 50 yards closer each time it came in. So finally, we looked up, and we're like, dude, I said, those fins are so huge, but they're so close. And it kind of threw us for a loop. Because you could see the black at the very tip, and I was like, what kind of shark is that? Because it was real white toward the bottom, and then the other one was black. And then it finally dawned, and we're like, dude, what if it's a big old manta ray? And then it was like, how can it be a manta ray if it was a live Jack Crevalle? Why would it pick up a live Jack Crevalle? But then we start to really think about it. The mandibles on a manta ray don't fold back, and they are monster, majestic animals that just swim through the water without a worry in the world. So they bump into something, they just keep swimming. And obviously that jack wasn't nothing, or maybe it was trying to eat the bait fish that were around the Jack Crevalle. I don't know. It was weird. So one of the guys gets out on the kayak, and he's like, you know what, I'm going to take off, and I'm going to see if there's any cobia around this manta ray. And so at this time, he takes off over there, and I got it close enough to where we can confirm it, but we didn't know the size of it. And that's when, my buddy on the kayak swims out there, and his name was Derek. Crazy boy, but that's a fishing fanatic right there. So he gets out on the kayak, and he's on a frenzy. The frenzy is an 8-foot kayak, And so on the mandibles, these are the mandibles, the points on the front, and these are the wings. The wing was folded over like this. He swims behind it, on the kayak behind it, the manta ray, because he didn't want to get between me and the manta ray just in case it took off left or right. And he disappears on the kayak. All we see are the points of the kayak from where the wing was folded over. And at this time, it was just like, Jesus, that thing is huge, you know, because you got to think, when a manta ray comes up and they stick their wing out, that's only like 30% of their body. It's not their center mass or their other wing that's hidden. And I would encourage y'all to take a look on the internet. There's a big manta ray that's posted up with a crane, and the guy's holding a little baby 3-footer that came out of that manta ray. They say that stingray weighed an estimated 5,000 pounds. So if you cut that wing off and fold it in half, it looks justifiably, you know, like the size of the guy that was on the kayak in the water next to it. Food for thought. Check out that picture. It's on the internet. So at this time, I'm like, wow, this thing is massive. And at the same time, you know, now we've gone into almost 3 hours of the fight. My phone's blowing up. My son is, Dad, where are you? You're supposed to pick me up at this time. You know, he's calling me. He's, Dad, where are you at? You know, you said you were going to bring in this fish. I said, Dad, Papa, I'm still fighting it. It's a monster stingray. He's like, Daddy, you catch sharks. What's a stingray? And I was like, Papa, you don't understand. This thing is huge. It's bigger than anything I've ever seen. And he's like, well, hurry up and win the fight, Dad. You're supposed to pick me up. So, you know, I'm under the pressure, under the gun of, I got to go pick up my son. You know, it was my day to have him. And so, you know, I'm starting to feel bad, but I know that if I didn't pull this thing in, I didn't want to leave a leader hanging off of this majestic animal for it to get caught up in something and die later on. So I'm telling him, Papa, as soon as I can get there, I'll go pick you up, you know. So I'm fighting this thing, and finally, you know, about 3 hours into it, it comes in and it starts to swim in front of the pier. So I'm telling everybody on the pier, I say, hey, get your lines in. I said, because I'm not controlling this thing. He's swimming where he wants. I've just wore him down just enough to have him come in front of the pier. He sets that other wing down, and that's what we found out too. When I had control over him, when he was swimming in, he was on his side. As soon as he would dump that second wing in, that's when he would turn and burn. Like nothing was even holding him back. And I was like, I mean, we saw it. It happened over and over. As he got closer, we could see that second one disappear, and then he was gone. So, you know, I'm telling people on the pier, I was like, pull your stuff in. I said, because if he goes into it, I have no, you know, he's gonna rip your gear up. Because once you get close into the pier like that, you're dealing with a lot of rods and reels that are only, you know, 50-pound tests, 30-pound tests. You know, it's all cast out gear. Big rigs were still way out there. So I had no worries on them, but still, it was, you know, I'm not going to sit there and cut the line to leave a 19-foot leader with 600-pound mono and cable and hooks on a manta ray. That wouldn't be right. So I started once it came to the pier, I put more pressure trying to get it to come closer so we can lasso the leader. Once we would have lassoed the leader, we would have had a bit more control, is what our thought was. And at that point, I'm up about halfway up the pier. No, I wasn't. As soon as it starts coming in, I'm still on the left side of the pier, and I'm starting to warn everybody over there. And so that's at that point, I'm starting to put a little bit more pressure on him, because pressure of trying to get my son and end the fight quickly, so that way we can get control of this big manta ray. It was just, it was crazy. My butt was probably 8 inches off the deck. This rod was bowed over. Like I said, I've never seen a 555 bowed over like this. And then finally the line gives way. Comes all the way back. I slam into the floor. The guys that were around, they're like, oh, you know, hey, you're right. I said, I'm fine. I said, just get the rod and everything, because, you know, I'm still holding it like this, you know, plowed into the concrete. And everybody comes running over, because, I mean, it was loud when it finally happened. And when I hit the floor, it was even louder, you know. So they picked me up. we start, getting the gear off of me and this and that. And they're like, what happened? I said, I don't know, Well, we pulled the line in and we could see where the mono was like this. Say we zoomed in and it started to taper off where it had gotten real thin, and it was probably only like 50-pound test line at the very tip. So what I guess it was doing was swimming against the floor and shaving off the monofilament. I mean, I don't know what else it could have been, or maybe just from enough rubbing against the skin. I've never felt a manta ray in real life, but I would think they're smooth like a devil ray or a cow nose or any other stingray. I mean, they're really soft. But to see it shave down like that on that last little bit was pretty crazy. And the total fight time for that was a little over 3 hours. And we got to see it though. That is the thing that haunts you the most, is when you hook a monster like that and you fight it and fight it and fight it and you lose it without seeing it. Oh, that's a scary one. But for me to actually see it, I felt good, but I was still concerned that the leader was on the stingray. And when he had our buddy Derek had swum around this manta ray, he had said that it was hooked on the bottom side near the mouth. The Jack Crevalle wasn't there, just the two hooks. And I didn't think to tell him to unhook it. So there was so many things that could have went wrong that didn't. You hook up a monster and something comes along and cuts you off and stuff like that. So again, fighting this big old monster, I learned how much drag I can actually exert on a fish, using that pound test line. Well, since then, I've increased my drag for the type of test line, and what I mean by that is now I'm using 130-pound Jerry Brown hollow core and no more monofilament, so I've got zero stretch on it, which gives me a lot more line capacity. So if I were to hook up another big one like this, I wouldn't be worried about it, because I mean, seeing 200 to 300 yards of line still left on your reel has been the closest I've been to ever being spooled. But it also built up my confidence to know that if I do hook a monster shark, I've got the complete abilities to be able to get it in without any worries, especially after fighting a manta ray of this size, because any stingray I've ever fought, is pound for pound, has always been a lot harder than any shark I've ever fought. I've done, 9-foot hammers and stuff like that, but not any over the 10-foot range. So that's definitely going to be a learning experience, but I am definitely excited and ready for it. So, all right, guys. Well, I'm pulling up to one of the spots where I got to make a delivery, and this is Storytelling Thursday. I hope you enjoyed our story of the manta ray. That was one crazy fight. So definitely one for the books, one I will never forget. And even today, my son still, we'll talk about it and laugh, because he was very young at the time, and now he's a lot older, and he's seen a lot more of these fights happening, in person. So it's pretty awesome. Gotta love my son and see what he does. And again, thanks to everybody that was out there that gave me a hand. Without their support and having some assistance, as always, a lot of these major catches wouldn't happen. So again, it was one of the first tests of pulling monster weight with one of our big shark leaders, but we just had to do it with the actual land-based truck, and we've done that. So if y'all haven't checked out us pulling an F450, that might be a video y'all will want to check out as well. All right, guys, y'all have a good one.